Hi everyone, welcome to the joint webinar with Codecov and CircleCI. My name is Aaron Gajewski. I'm a solutions engineer here at CircleCI, and I also have with me Tom from Codecov. Just before we begin, I'd like to go over a few logistics. So we are using Zoom webinar. So if you look below, you'll see a Q&A button. So if you do have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, please feel free to use that Q&A feature. And Tom and I will do our best to speak to those questions in the dedicated Q&A section near the end of the webinar. In addition, the slides that you're seeing here, as well as the video recording, will be made available later. So if you see any good tidbits or information that you'd like to capture, don't fret, it will be available for you to view later. So just moving towards the, moving for the agenda, we've taken care of introductions. How this is gonna work is I'm going to give a nice intro to CircleCI Orbs. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to pass it over to Tom, who's going to talk to you at a high level about Codecov, and then he's going to dive a little bit deeper and give you a hands-on demo of the Codecov Orb. Once we're finished up with that, we're going to move into our dedicated Q&A section, where we'll do our best to speak to your questions and address them as we can. So with that, let's get started. So the first question that you might have is, what is an orb? Now, an orb is essentially a package of CircleCI configuration that you can reuse and share throughout all of the different projects of your organization. So an orb is going to contain some predefined commands and executors and jobs that you then can reference in your CircleCI config to perform whatever work or integration that the orb provides. So let's say you had a standardized deployment process. You could package up that process into an orb, and then you could reference it throughout all of the different projects of your organization. In addition, what it also allows you to do is to streamline the process of integrating with your favorite tools that you might like to include as a part of your CI process. A perfect example is Codecov, and we'll talk about how that's done a little bit later in the webinar. So all in all, orbs are going to make your CircleCI a lot cleaner, and it's also going to be able to keep things up to date as the tools of the ecosystem update and change. So an orb has three main parts. The first is commands. So commands are essentially a set of steps that can be parameterized and invoked in a job. The executors are basically telling CircleCI what type of environment should I run when executing these jobs. And then the jobs work very similarly to how they do today in your CircleCI config. So at the bottom here, you can see we have a hello build job. We're defining the executor. We're using the default that we defined above in the executor section. And then as the first step in the job, we're invoking the say hello command that we defined in the command section. So this is a very simple example of an orb. So here's an example of some of our partner orbs that are available today. So lots of companies in the DevOps space, in the monitoring space. If you are interested in becoming a technology partner with CircleCI, please feel free to contact us after the webinar. We'd love to help you get set up and write your first orb and get it published in our public registry. With that, let's get building. I've included a bunch of links, resources, and examples for you to take a look at. There's a lot of documentation on how to get up and running with orbs, how to write your first orb. I've also included links to the orb registry so you can see which orbs are already publicly available that you can use in your projects today. And as always, if you need help, please feel free to ask the community on our Discuss forums at discuss.circleci.com. We have lots of customers and employees there to help answer your questions. And as always, if you're having any technical difficulties, please feel free to open up a ticket at our support center at support.circleci.com. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for attending the webinar. Here at CircleCI, we're very, very excited about orbs, and we're very excited to share them with our wider partner community, such as Codecov. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom to walk through a high-level overview of Codecov.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much, Aaron. So yeah, again, I'm Tom from Codecov. I work on the developer relations team. Before this, I was working as an engineer for about 8 years, but now I work with developer communities to help them however I can whether that's through coding in open source repositories or sharing content and best practices, and of course, doing webinars like this. So as Aaron mentioned, CircleCI Orbs are a fantastic way to add reusable configurations in your CI/CD process. And we think that code coverage is one of the most important parts of that process that you can add. And today, we're going to share about how you can use the Codecov Orb in order to do just that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what code coverage is first, in case any of you aren't familiar with it. Then I'll kind of talk about what Codecov does and how that might be useful for you and your organization. And then finally, we'll do a demo of the actual orb so that you can see how easy it is to get up and running and to start uploading coverage reports to Codecov. So for those of you who aren't familiar with code coverage, it's pretty simple. The idea is that the best practices say engineers should write tests for the code. But just because you write tests doesn't necessarily mean that you're testing the code that is written. And that can happen for a variety of reasons. You might have some branching logic that you don't end up testing. There's an if-else statement. You test the if, you're not testing the else statement. You might not even be writing tests at all. But one of the most common cases that we sort of see is that a developer, a few weeks or a few months down the road is touching the code base, making changes to it, and not necessarily changing the underlying tests that are associated with it. And that can obviously lead to not having good code quality and good code health. So code coverage runs alongside your test runner and basically collects information about what lines of code get hit and what lines of code are getting missed. And this can be really valuable to engineering teams to be able to evaluate how their code health is. And so code coverage is one of the best objective metrics that you can use in order to measure code health and also to give confidence when you're pushing code changes. Now, most languages have their own coverage tool. And so the way Codecov works is that we take those uploads and we spit back absolute and relative code coverage. So to talk about Codecov a little bit, we're leading dedicated code coverage tool in the market, and we have tens of millions of these uploads every year. And they come from a variety of different companies and organizations, ranging from your open source communities all the way to pet projects. And we deal with companies that are in the Fortune 100. So we deal with a lot of different styles of uploads every year. We started in 2015, and I think one of the reasons why we have been so successful is that we have a distributed, remote-first team of developers and development enthusiasts. Oh, yeah, awesome. Thanks, Aaron. So sorry, there's one slide before that. Thanks, Aaron. Cool. So as I mentioned before, the way that users interact with Codecov is they upload these code testing outputs to Codecov, and we spit that back with absolute and relative code coverage metrics. Codecov is product agnostic over languages and services. And what that means is basically we deal with over 20 different programming languages, as well as a slew of code hosting services. So if you use GitHub, if you use GitLab, if you use Bitbucket or anything else, we deal with that and we can handle it. One of the cool features that is pretty exclusive to Codecov is that you can flag different parts of your code base. So what that means is, let's say you're in your code base and you want to split your tests up by backend and front end, or you have a split between unit tests and integration tests. You can go ahead and flag those different reports so that the changes that you make are only reflected in what you want to be flagged. And finally, we provide a dashboard for individual contributors and engineering leaders and engineering managers. And this is kind of twofold. One thing that's useful about it is that it shows you the code coverage trends over time. And it also lets you dig deep and figure out what part of your code base may not be tested as much as you want it to be. So to dig a little bit deeper into that, Aaron, cool. One of the things that we want to really focus on and that we do is to get as much of the tools that we have in front of developers in their own workflow, not having to worry about going somewhere else or you know, not being in their flow, in their workflow. So one of the things that you can do is set thresholds for absolute and relative code coverage. What that basically means is like if I'm a company and I've been doing code coverage for a long time, and I might set, hey, I want my code coverage to be at 80% for every single commit that happens. You can do that with Codecov. And conversely, if you're new at code coverage, maybe let's say you haven't really added a lot of tests to your repository, you might be starting somewhere at like 10 or 20 or 30% coverage. And so setting a goal of like 80% isn't as valuable because that's not going to change quickly over time. But instead, let's say you want every single pull request that happens to gradually increase your coverage. So every PR should at least stay the same or increase coverage. And you can do that with Codecov. And so of course, like we can allow you to block off being able to merge a pull request. In this particular case, you're looking at what happens, obviously, if it passes on GitHub. And in the next slide, you'll see what it looks like if you're not, if that doesn't happen. Oh, just kidding. In any case, if it doesn't fail, it'll prevent the user from actually committing the code. So one of the other things that we want to do to make sure that the code coverage tools and systems are in place in front of the developer as much as possible, if you go to codecov.io after you upload a coverage report, you can see the line-by-line coverage. And this is useful if you want to say, hey, I'm building out this new feature. I've written some tests, but I don't necessarily know where I am missing test coverage. Going to codecov.io highlights line by line what is being hit and what is not being hit. Okay, cool. We also have partnered with SourceGraph to produce a browser extension so that if you're at GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket, you can see the code coverage inline in your browser without having to go anywhere else. Again, just trying to get code coverage in front of developers in their workflow as easily and as most manageable as possible. Final thing, I mentioned before there, we produced a dashboard that really lets individual contributors and engineering leaders to really dig deep into what their code coverage looks like. And so the top line graph you see is just a trend of what the code coverage looks like over time. And of course, in the bottom left graph, it's a sunburst graph. And I actually really like this one because you can easily see what parts of your code base aren't being tested as much as you want to. It's all color coded and you can click in into the red spot and see, oh, we just created this module. It's not getting tested as much. Maybe we should focus on the next sprint on adding more tests and getting higher test coverage in this area. And so with that, I want to talk a little bit about the orb now and how easy it is to kind of get set up. So on the right side, these are pretty much all the lines of code you need in order to get started. So it's really simple. And like this is going to be the same for pretty much everyone who's using the orb. And once we do the demo, you'll kind of see like how quick the changes. But I kind of want to highlight some of the parameters that we're going to be using. So as of right now, the file parameter is required. Basically, you're telling us where is the file with the code coverage data being located. You can also tell us if you want to add any flags to it. So backend, front end, unit test, integration test. If you have a private repository, you might want to include the token. If you want to change the upload name to something that makes more sense to you as opposed to the CircleCI build number. And of course, if you have a different configuration than what is default, you can specify that as well. So Aaron, I'm going to take the presentation and do a little bit of a demo here, if that's okay.
Sure, let me stop sharing.
Okay, let's see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So over here, I have a test repository. And like all demos, anything can happen. But of course, it's pretty simple. We have three basic objects called adder, calculator, and subtractor. Two of them are Python files. One is a TypeScript file, basically showing that we handle different types of languages and of uploads. Now, I understand that most of you are going to have much more complex code bases than, three files and their associated tests with it. And we highly encourage you to try Codecov and to see the complexity that it deals with and how it can handle with your code system. But of course, just to make it really simple and to show you how easy it is to integrate, we decided to strip it down and make a really nice, easy repo. This repo, of course, is public, and you can take a look at it at any time. And there will be a link to it at the end of the webinar. So you'll see two main screens where my cursor is right now. This is what the pre-existing config might look like. And on the right panel, we have all of the changes that we might possibly need in order to get the orb running. So I'll explain line by line how they sort of work. The first thing is changing the version from 2.0 to 2.1. That's just to get orbs to be running on your config. And then I'm going to copy over the actual orb. This just makes sure that the config has access to the Codecov Orb. And then finally, well, you'll notice that I have some Python tests here and some front-end tests here. So I'm going to split up the way that we do the coverage by uploading first the back-end test or the Python test. In this case, and of course, what I'm calling front-end, I'm going to be inputting after upload. You'll see for both of them, they have two different parameters, file and flags. Files lets us know where the actual coverage file is, and flags, you'll see in a second, basically helps us separate the code in the way that we want it to. So I'm going to save this now. Oops, sorry. I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to add it to Git and commit it and coverage. Hopefully this works. Oh, no, okay. I'm going to force push that. All right, I'm going to come over back here to GitHub, and we should see, I think because I pushed it, I'm going to have to just create, oh no. Aha, okay. So we're playing around with this before. So what had already happened is the Codecov bot has already run on the test coverage, but what should happen, oh my, is that CircleCI will kick off the process with the new coverage, Codecov coverage in the config file. So it's build error, I'm not sure why, but that's okay because we've already run before, so we already have all the data we actually need. But what you guys were seeing over here is that once Codecov actually gets the uploads, we post the data back into the PR so that you can see it right in front of you. And again, as I mentioned, if you're a viewer, you don't have to go anywhere else. But let's say we want to dig a little bit deeper and kind of see what's going on in the report. So there's a link you can view the report at. And we can see, as I mentioned before, like there's that split between front end and back end. And we notice that back end isn't getting, it doesn't hit 100% coverage. And that might be okay. Maybe your organization says 80% is fine. But it just lets you know what's kind of going on and allows you to do that split. I mentioned before on codecov.io, you have this main dashboard, and you kind of see here where we have some tests that are 100%. These ones will be a little bit less, and that's kind of the same as what we saw on the previous page. But digging a little bit deeper, let's try to take a look line by line to see what's going on with our coverage. If I click on source and I go to, let's say, the outer.py file, I'll notice that, oh, right here, the multiply function isn't getting run. So I must not have a test actually running, x times y. And for me, I can go back into my code. I can add a test around there and get it covered. So the other thing I kind of want to show is that, again, I realize that you guys probably have much more complex systems than just 3 classes. So Vue.js is a tool that uses CircleCI and Codecov, and you can see here, obviously the sunburst is a lot more complicated, but from it you see, oh, right here, there must be something that we're not testing as much as everything else. So I can click on it and I can dive a little bit deeper and say, oh, okay, let's look at codegen.js. And if you look, you'll see, some lines are getting hit, some lines aren't getting hit. And from here, I can make better engineering decisions about what I should be focusing on if we're trying to add more tests to our code base. The last thing I kind of want to talk about is that One of the other really powerful things about Codecov is that we merge all of these different reports together. Like we saw in this repo, there's two different reports that kind of come up, and we merge that all together as one, allowing you still, though, to split it in a visual way if you want to. But furthermore, if you have different builds that are running off of the same commit, we merge those builds together into one little data pack for you. And so with that, you guys can still see? Perfect. To summarize, basically, Codecov, we merge these coverage reports and builds across multiple languages and testing frameworks. Basically, whatever you're using, we're trying to make sure that you can get good code coverage results from it. We try to make it as easy as possible for you to view this information, and we help to allow engineering organizations to make decisions based on what their code health is like, and to be able to push their code with confidence. Again, as I mentioned, the repo is down below if you want to check it out and see what the code looks like. Obviously, there are other examples on our organization level repository that you can check out as well. Well, with that, we're going to take some Q&A.
Perfect. All right. So I got a couple questions. Tom, I think this one's for you. Anton says, in your demo, you had multiple upload steps within the same job. How about workflows? Will Codecov merge reports from different jobs within a single workflow?
So yes is the answer. I'm not actually 100% positive how it works within the YAML file, but we do take that into account. If you have different workflows, or if you are uploading in multiple steps, that should totally work. It really is tied towards the commit, and so as long as it's on the same commit, that shouldn't be a problem at all.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, one more question here from Jesse. Is there an advantage to using the orb over integrating Codecov without the orb other than config cleanliness? Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Thanks, Aaron. No, please.
In a general way, this kind of applies to all orbs, but other than config cleanliness, the nice thing is that if some sort of functionality changes, maybe uploads are done in a different way, all you have to do is upload the orb, and your projects that contain that orb will automatically be updated, right? So if you wanted to make a small change to that integration in one project, without the orb, you'd have to sort of copy and paste that throughout all of your different projects, whereas an orb, it's sort of a centralized place to keep things up to date and in sync.
Yeah, matching what Aaron said, basically, like, I think one of the most powerful things about the CircleCI Orbs are these reusable little nuggets of code that you can put across, your repositories in org or whatever you're dealing with.
Yep. And in addition to that, orbs can be extended. So for example, here at CircleCI, we loved the Codecov Orb so much, we basically extended it. We're a closure shop. So we made a closure Codecov Orb using the standard Codecov Orb. So you can start extending functionality as you look at the existing orbs that are out there today. Perfect. Any other questions that anybody may have?
And if not, it's great. It means the orb is that simple to use. We hope, of course, that you use it, that you love it.
Absolutely. And yeah, so if there's no other questions, really thank you all for attending the webinar. If you do have any questions that you think of later, please feel free to connect with us. We're always happy to talk orbs. So I'm sure Tom is as well, to talk Codecov. So please feel free to get in touch. And like I said, all the video recording and the slides will be made available later today, as well as you can go to the Codecov example right there and take a look at what Tom was presenting today. So with that, thank you everyone. Oh, go ahead. Oh, did we get another one?
Oh, no. I was just going to say, as Aaron said, thank you so much for all attending. If you want to reach out to me, just email me at tom@codecov.io. Happy to answer any questions or help you through anything that you might be working with. So again, thanks so much for attending, and looking forward to seeing you all use the orb.
Yep. Thanks, Tom, and thanks everybody.
Awesome.
Take care.
Great. Take care.